Welcome, everybody, to the JFK Live podcast. I'm sorry, I just got off the phone with Oliver, and he says he can't come on. So I'm disappointed by that. So we have Jim DiEugenio here. I wanted to talk with Oliver about President Trump's order, its implications for the JFK story. I'm sorry that Oliver feels that he's not prepared. He's a little uncertain about what we want to talk to. He wants more time to do that. So let me turn it over to you, Jim. Where's Oliver coming from? Where are we now? What can you tell us? I'm very disappointed he's not coming here. I hope he will come on next week. What can you tell us, Jim?
I don't know why he decided not to come on today. I hope he does come on at a later time. Okay. I
Well, I mean,
think
yeah.
I
What do
think
you
he
think?
might not. I think he might not think he's prepared about the status of the documents and everything. Okay. And about what's going on with the Congresswoman Luna, and that whole thing with Radcliffe and Tulsi Gabbard.
I think that he's feeling the pressure of the moment. There's a lot of attention on him and the JFK records and what's going to happen. And that's why I think a lot of people were interested in hearing from him. So he's not ready to participate. That's the bottom line. So I think what we need to do is hear from Jim DiEugenio. Jim, can you inform us any more about what's going on?
It's just what I suspected. He wants to brush up on this, okay, and he'll come in at a later time.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
So,
So
so
it's
but
nothing personal or anything like that. Okay. Uh, he
no, no,
likes he likes to be prepared.
yes. And I sense that when I was talking to him. I'm not close to Oliver as Jim is, but I sense when he's uncertain and he likes to be prepared
Mhm.
and he wasn't quite ready for whatever reason. So I respect those reasons and hope he'll come on next week. I guess what I'd like to ask you, Jim, is, in this moment, where President Trump has issued an order to release all of the JFK files, um, where do you think this is going? Are you have some access to Oliver's thinking? I know you can't speak for him, but what do you think is going to happen? Is this a hopeful moment for you or not?
Well, I think well let's go back a little bit.
Yeah.
We know that at the last minute in 2017, Trump was met by Mike Pompeo and several other people, and he decided that he was not going to follow through on his previous tweet, that he
Yeah.
was looking forward to declassifying all the JFK documents. All right. Now, what's so interesting about this is that I'm sure you're aware of this. He was badgered on this issue in front of millions of people by Joe Rogan, okay,
Hmm.
and to a lesser degree by Andrew Napolitano. All right. And Andrew Napolitano just came out and said, you broke your promise to the American people. And Trump said, what do you mean? and, and Napolitano says, you told the American people that you were going to declassify the last of the JFK documents, and you didn't. Okay. And so Trump replied with something, words to the effect that if they would have shown you what they showed me, you'd have probably done the same thing. And Napolitano is sitting there going, who is they? And what did they show you? You
Yeah,
know,
and
so-
yeah, and I thought Napolitano's response was great. Like, what is that supposed to mean? Like, what are you telling us? And so I think Trump was very embarrassed, and now he's trying to make up for that and not be embarrassed again, right? Not look bad again. But so the question now is 45, 50 days after he issued that order, okay, there's no documents, there's no nothing. What's what's going on. And I was hoping to get Oliver's, sense of, can this process work? Are you hopeful? And, maybe with what is your thought?
From what I understand, the people involved in this should have been the director of the CIA, uh, Tulsi Gabbard, at DNI, and Trump. Okay. Now we have a latecomer to the game, this Congresswoman Luna. All right, which she like came out of left field, and so with Comer's blessing, they formed this committee on declassification, which has about 6 or 7 subject matters. But according to her, at the top of their list is JFK. So she seems to me, as I've seen her on TV a couple of times. All right, although she's not very well versed in the minutiae of the case, she seems to me very gung ho about going ahead and declassifying the last of the JFK files.
Yeah. So can I interject here, Jim?
Sure.
I had a very good conversation, and I'm going to make news right here. Pay attention. I had a very good conversation with Representative Luna yesterday, where she said that the concerns of the JFK researchers will be conveyed to John Ratcliffe personally, and that the documents and the full disclosure imperative that the JFK research community felt, she will represent that to the Trump administration. So I thought that was a very positive news. I had the same impression you did. She's not very well versed in the case, but she's very committed to it. And I take her at face value. You know, she's a Republican. I'm a Democrat. So, we have different agendas, but I take her at face value. And I'm hoping that she will deliver on what she says. She will make the kind of things that Mary Farrell Foundation, JFK Facts, JFK research community in general are talking about. She will make our views known. So I think that's a very positive development.
When I say that she's not very well versed in that is completely a relative statement because to be very well versed in the JFK case, it takes like 5 years to read through all this stuff and to be very well versed in the case. So I don't expect somebody who just jumped into it 6 weeks ago, to be very well versed on all the different
Oh,
angles and aspects of the case. You know.
no, and I don't think, from what I hear of what she says and from my conversation with her, she's done some homework. She's not
Okay.
totally well versed yet, but she's trying and she's committed. You know what she said to me? She said, "We need to change the narrative," you know? And I felt like that's what this is about. That's what full disclosure is about. That's what full disclosure will achieve. So that's a positive sign, and I wanted to convey that to Oliver. I wanted to convey to Oliver. I wanted Oliver to take a victory lap.
Hmm.
President Trump's order is a vindication of Oliver. Okay. Oliver said 33 years ago, full disclosure around JFK is important. And in response to that message that he sent in his movie, the American people overwhelmingly supported him. And the JFK Records Act was passed in response.
Now, getting back to that point,
Yeah.
I think of a very important development at that time, if you recall, was the hearings uh, in Congress, where you had people like Blakey and Stokes and Oliver, all testifying in public, you know, about this particular issue. And I think you can still see those on YouTube. Okay, and I thought that those were very interesting conversations. I thought Oliver was very well prepared. All right, and we should. I don't know if you're aware of this, but one of the reasons that the ARB did their medical investigation, led by Jeremy Gunn and Doug Horn, was because Stokes went in, and he was the final chairman of the House Select Committee on Assassinations, and he told them directly. He said, "Look, nobody was satisfied with the medical inquiry that the HSCA did, and he encouraged them to go ahead and open up that subject again." And that's how Jeremy Gunn and Doug Horn were allowed to go ahead and do their rather far-ranging and very interesting, inquiry. So I hope Luna does decide to have, it'll at least get on C-SPAN, and because I think she was talking about bringing some people from the Warren Commission, and everybody laughed at her because they said there's no, well, there is. There's Willens, and there's Bert Griffin, and I think there's Eisenberg also. They're still around. Okay. And Willens was a very, very important part of the Warren Commission. Okay. He was like, the Katzenbach's guy, on the Warren Commission. And if you study the whole mechanics of the way this worked, it was the commission to Willens, then to the senior and junior counsel. He was like the liaison. So he was in a very important spot. And he's still around.
He's the one that basically turned Bert Griffin around. Bert Griffin was kind of like a supporter, a critic of the commission. And Willens, once Willens' book came out, and I was talking to Griffin, and suddenly Griffin talked to him, and Griffin told me I got in trouble. Jeff, the amazing thing about Luna, what she said the other day on Fox, she said that she did not realize that the president can't simply declassify records, that they have to be reviewed by the agencies.
Yes.
The idea that she didn't know that is like...
Oh, and I think this is part of the problem is, people think, oh, Trump signed an order, so it's going to happen. And it's like, that's really not any realistic understanding of how things work.
I think there is a plan that's been prepared. It's not public because when she says that these people, they're being reviewed. So I think there is some plan that's been prepared that's not public that's being reviewed right now. And I don't know if they're using the transparency plans. I mean, there was that report from ABC News was it the 5th or the 7th? That said the plan had been submitted. So I'm concerned that there's a plan out there that has been prepared, and the CIA, the Attorney General, because the Attorney General has the FBI records, Gabbard on the DNI, and then Radcliffe, and then this security advisor, national security advisor. I think they're having records reviewed under some undisclosed plan, which should be public. That should be public. Like the transparency plans were as bad as they were.
Yeah.
See, this is a very interesting subject because if we dial back to October 2017, all right, the only person who could have stopped the final declassification was Trump.
Yes.
Because that's right in the law. At this time, everything will be declassified.
Certified, right? Section 5.
Everything will be out there except for the suggestion of the President of the United States. So it's incredible. And when you think about it, for these guys to wait to the very last day, it literally was the very last day that they went into the Oval Office and read Trump the Riot Act. I mean, can you imagine?
What happened, Jim, was that while they went into the office the day before, but from my lawsuit, you could see there was 12 versions of an executive order being drafted to postpone the records. He just didn't know about it.
Okay, but let's talk about 2025, not about 2017.
Right.
Okay. Um, Jim, do you think that we will have JFK documents in 30 days?
Oh, that's a very difficult question.
Yeah.
It's, if
No, I mean,
let's put
no,
it
and
this way.
I ask you, and I'm going to ask myself, and I would say maybe, maybe we will have some JFK documents in 30 days. Um,
I
uh,
think there's maybe a 50-50 chance,
yeah.
you know, but if I was a betting man, I wouldn't bet on it.
But again,
Yeah.
it depends on what is the criteria they're using to release the records. Is it that the transparency plans, or they have a different criteria? And I
You know,
wonder, her hearing, is her hearing scheduled yet? Luna's hearing?
Representative Luna told me that the hearing is scheduled for the 26th, but that could change.
Okay, because that might be the date where they try to feed the beast and dump some stuff.
You see, the thing is, what I've learned in this case, okay, and I've learned a lot of things, but what I've really learned in this case is that the bureaucracy in Washington and is it's not really an intangible thing. It's really a tangible thing.
Yeah.
These guys don't want to give up what they consider their territory. And they consider declassification to be their territory. Let me give you an example. Okay. Uh, One of the stories that Thunheim told us when we were filming JFK Revisited, okay, is that when the FBI liaison came in with his lawyer, they flashed a document up on the screen and they said, we're going to declassify this thing, you know, and you're going to have to give us a great reason for us not to. And the FBI guy was stunned. And he turns to the lawyer and he says, can they really do that? And the lawyer goes, yeah, they can. Okay. See, this is the mentality that you're up against with these
Yeah, no,
people.
and yeah, and so when people say Trump issued this order, Ratcliffe is his guy, it's going to happen. You know, the CIA is not going to change their mind because of what the president said. What the CIA does is they're going to go and try and change the president's mind. So
Right.
they don't have to have a confrontation with the president. They get the president to agree with their point of view. And I think that's what's going on right now, right? They want to look at these documents and they want to narrow the scope of Trump's executive order to protect what they've always wanted to protect.
And that was
And
already done, by the way, when he issued his order, because he could have said, I hereby declare under Section 5 that all the records are released, can be released. So someone
right,
got to him before then.
Yeah,
okay.
see,
So
yeah, that's a very good point. Okay. He did allow this little window,
Yes.
okay, that there's going to be some kind of a plan between these entities. Okay, if I was advising him, I wouldn't have. Don't put that in there. They'll use that, to move the world.
Because he said,
Okay.
under the statute, it's the public interest. He said it's in the public interest to release the records. He could have stopped there and instructed the National Archives to release all the records, but he didn't. He said
Mhm.
come up with a plan because he's obviously concerned someone got to him about there may be some secrets in there that we don't want to release.
so I conveyed to Representative Luna maybe 20 high priority documents. And I take her in good faith when she's going to present these to the administration for priority treatment. So to me, that's a very positive development. People can be cynical about Congress, people can be cynical about congressmen showboating and all of that, but you know, what else do we have but our elected representative? And I'm hopeful based on that alone.
Well, it looks like we have some people in the media, Napolitano and Rogan were on our side. You
And
know,
what's his name? Oh God,
Tucker.
no, the guy. God, the guy that went to jail for Uh,
The guy who went to
Roger
jail.
Stone.
That's
Roger
becoming a lot
Stone.
of people in the Trump administration.
Oh,
Roger
Roger
Stone.
Stone.
Roger
Oh, okay.
Stone had dinner with Trump a couple weeks ago, and he said he was going to talk to him directly. And Jim, you'll enjoy this. Roger Stone told us on a program that when Roger Stone first approached Trump about releasing the records, Trump said to him, "Why should I care about these?"
That's what Trump said?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Like he didn't
Okay.
know anything
You know,
about it. Like
yeah.
anyway, but
I mean,
that's ancient history.
well, the president's approach to the issue is transactional, as it is with most issues. So, you know, if there's a better deal for Trump that involves non-JFK disclosure, then he'll take that deal. But I think our goal is the good deal for Trump personally and the good deal for the country is full JFK disclosure. So
Right.
that's what we need to work for, and convince people and not get distracted by, I mean, you know, like you said, Jim, this task force has 7 different areas that look, 3 assassinations, COVID, 9/11, and Epstein and
Yes.
UFO. I mean,
Well, yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
yeah,
UAPs, yeah,
you
yeah.
know, that that's a recipe for that's not a recipe for success, okay? That's too scattered. I'm glad, and I think it's appropriate that they put JFK at the front of the line. That's the one that's been around the longest. That's the one that has the widest, public knowledge, accessibility, the longest lived. So I'm glad that they're going to make that a priority. I hope that these hearings can be, a positive thing in terms of not, some sensational revelation, which is what, kind of people are clamoring for, but laying out what the real situation with these records are. It's not simple.
Let me add this.
So,
If you understand how this all began, it's because Oliver put that crawler at the end of his movie.
yes, that's what I
Okay.
wanted to ask him about, the
Yeah.
origins of the JFK Records Act. Let me
Yeah.
just, let me
People
just,
were shocked
Yeah.
when they saw this. They said, "What? 30 years later, and we still can't have all the facts about the JFK case?" You
yeah,
know?
so let me just tell, because there's maybe people listening who don't know this story, Jim. So at the end of JFK, the movie, Oliver puts a little note and says 90% of the government's records on this subject are still secret. That movie was released in late 92. So 30
No,
years,
late 91.
late
91.
90. Okay. So, 28 years after the fact, and 90%, and he was absolutely right, 90% of the records were secret. So Capitol Hill is immediately inundated with email. There wasn't email then, mail, and people said, this is outrageous, do something about this. And Congress actually did the right thing. They passed a very strong law which said all assassination related records in the possession of the government have a presumption of immediate disclosure. It is thanks to Oliver and Oliver alone that thought became law, and that thought is still governing our discourse to this day. That's why I wanted to thank Oliver tonight. What an accomplishment to make that point and have it stick for 33 years, 8 years after the statutory deadline. And he got another president who had broke his promise before to come around and say, we're actually going to do it this time. It's a very impressive accomplishment, and Oliver deserves credit for it. I wanted to give him credit tonight, and I'm sorry he's not here. I wanted him to take a victory lap because,
By the way, Jeff, there's another monkey wrench in Congress, and that's Tom Cotton. Tom Cotton apparently Tucker Carlson is saying that Tom Cotton is the one that nixed Bobby's daughter-in-law to be CIA director, and that he was against disclosing the records. Now, Jesse Waters basically called Tom Cotton onto his show the other day. Tom Cotton denied that he is against releasing the records, but he's a wild card. But he's in the Senate. But he is a wild card. He's a very
well, look, I mean, we can assume that there are powerful people and powerful interests in Washington who don't want to disclose this information, right? Because they've been hiding it for 62 years, right? They're pretty serious about keeping it secret. So those interests are opposed to it. The question is,
Strong
you know,
enough to like
how do
Nick.
we overcome them?
What?
How do we overcome
Right,
those forces?
right. So, like, it looks like he was now backtracking when he got
Yeah,
when
it
Tucker.
looks like Cotton actually is now saying, no, 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 I didn't mean that at all,
Right, right.
etc.
Once
No,
Okay.
no,
Tucker,
because public opinion is very strong on this.
yes,
When Luna went online and said, "I'm going to have hearings in Dallas," and she got 10,000 comments, 95% of them negative, saying, "Don't hold hearings, give us the documents."
right, right.
So, the public opinion is very mobilized. This is another important point about the moment we're in. Public opinion is very mobilized, and the usual kick the can down the road. Let us have a few redactions. Believe us, it's national security. Trust us. There's nothing there. Move along. Little man killed a big man. Get over it. All of that stuff doesn't work anymore. It's over, and that's the important point about this moment. The people at the CIA who think that they're going to delay, that's over. It's not going to happen, okay? Because everybody is against them. In divided America, very divided America, no question about it. America is united on one point. Release those records very soon,
The
or
thing is, we don't have a JFK movie that everyone could like mobilize around. Well, I was going to ask him, for example, is like, what can we do with all these discrete platforms now? Obviously, Tucker Carlson is one vehicle, but is there some kind of vehicle that we can mobilize people to call their Congress people and their senators to make sure the message gets out like it did in '91?
Well, see, that's one of the reasons I was hoping Luna would hold public hearings.
Yes.
well,
Okay.
no, I think I hope that she will have hearings that lay out the real situation, that aren't made for TV, made for Twitter, social media,
Right,
some
exactly.
but are like, because there, you can tell when you read these reactions, you can tell there's a
Mhm.
massive audience that is sitting there saying, we want an answer on this.
See, like, for example, Blakey and Cornwell are still around.
Yeah.
One question, if I was talking to Luna, I would say, Mr. Blakey, why did you classify 435,000 pages of documents from the House Select Committee on Assassinations? I mean, the Warren Commission published 26 volumes. You only published 12. Okay. So what was meant to be so secret? Well, today we know it was so secret about all this stuff. Okay, with the Lopez report, for just one example. If you talk to Danny and Eddie, they'll tell you how cynical they were about what the Warren Commission conclusions were on Mexico City. That's just one area, you
And they
know.
didn't intend the medical stuff to get out, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
There was a lot of interesting stuff that the House Select Committee stowed away about their medical investigation, you know. And we all know. I'm not telling you guys anything, but maybe somebody listening doesn't know. They out and out lied in Volume 7, page 37, of their report, where they said, contrary to the doctors at Parkland Hospital, all the medical personnel at Bethesda did not recall seeing this baseball-sized hole in the back of Kennedy's head. And then when Gary Aguilar, who's one of the best people we have on that aspect, confronted these guys with these documents that the ARB declassified, which said, no, you're dead wrong about this. There were 24 people at Bethesda who saw this hole in the back of Kennedy's head. And he turns around to Andy Purdy, to Blakey, to Bodden, okay, who was their chief of the forensic pathology. Purdy was their chief investigator. Okay, which one of you guys wrote this? And they all denied that they wrote it.
Hey, Jim, do you have
Jeff
any new information about?
Jeff Crudell had a very interesting interview with Purdy
Yes.
on his website, which explores that exact issue, which is the HSCA was not well informed about what the medical evidence really was.
Yeah.
But I don't want to dwell on the past. I want to dwell on the future, because the mistakes of the past, I mean, they're there. I mean, the previous investigations were flawed, they were compromised, they were pressured. You know, can we get beyond that now? And so I want to ask you, Jim, will we learn anything if all these documents are declassified? What significant will we learn, do you think?
Yeah, I think we will. Okay. Well, I just go by, look, why would they go to all this trouble of concealing? Oh, and I've seen different numbers on this. I don't know what the real number is. I've heard 3,800. I've heard 3,700.
3,800 is if you look at the National Archives spreadsheet of JFK documents and how many they say of the JFK collection have redactions, the archives figure is about 3,800. Now,
Okay.
and in addition to that, we have the FBI came forward and they said they found 2,400 additional documents, which, according to the National Archives, have never been given to the archives. So those
That's
are
the one. That's the key.
that are in the JFK collection, at least according to the FBI and the National Archives. So
That's
those are the records that under any, the minimal implementation of the executive order, we would see those records.
Yes.
But the 2,400 FBI records, Jim, do you have any idea where they were? Because we know they're about 13,000 pages roughly. And
Well,
what could they possibly have in them?
Well, my question is, according to what I've read, the review board didn't even know about these.
That's
Okay.
that's what the FBI and the archives say, that these were not seen by the review board. Now, Larry, you said, where do they come from? I asked the FBI PAO for a statement on this, and they told me that they had started digitizing their records in 2020. And when they got the president's order, they went back and checked their records, and that's when they found these documents. Now, if you think about it, right, once you digitize your records and you have a lot of metadata for your records, your ability to search them and find assassination related material is enhanced 1,000%, right? Because you say, oh, okay, we found these records. Let's plug in the name Oswald. Okay, how many records do we get? Let's plug in the name Ruby. How many records do we get? Let's plug in Dallas. Let's plug in Dealey Plaza. Let's plug in Guy Bannister.
But that calls into question.
If you do those search terms,
Right.
you can identify a lot of records. And so to me, it seems like that's what happened, was because they have a digitization, they have an enhanced ability to search, and they found more records that had.
But this calls into question the good faith effort they made with the ARB and the HSCA, because with the ARB, the FBI was the leading agency that fought back and actually appealed to the president several times. So where were these records where were they that they weren't found the first time?
Well, one question that the Luna faces and the Congress faces is, yeah, you want to get the records out, but the questions you're asking, why weren't they provided before? I talked to Judge Tunheim. He said 2,400 records. He said, I'm waiting for an explanation of why we didn't get those,
Right.
which is like perfectly reasonable, right?
It's great that they scanned them and they
Well, see, that makes a very good precedent for Luna. Okay. Well, she can say, well, look at this. You had the FBI now here we are in the brand new millennium. Okay. The third decade coming up, and they're finding new documents. Well, you guys at the CIA, why don't you do the same thing? You guys at the State Department, why don't you do the same thing? Okay. Let's see if we have documents that the review board never even touched, you know?
No, and that's why I thought the FBI's disclosure was very positive, right? The president issues an order. Okay, let's go check our records. We found some records. We turn them over. Yes, every agency should do that. Should CIA do that? Absolutely. Should Secret Service do that? Because yes, we need to do a new search for records that are out there. Because if you, like the FBI found, you digitize your records, you can find more JFK records very easily. And so, yes, every agency should do that. And to me, that's the one positive development since Trump issued this order. That's the one sign of progress, is that the FBI complied. The FBI did what what a federal agency is supposed to do,
And
respond
yet,
to
and yet they
orders.
haven't been released. They're being reviewed.
Well, no, the FBI told me they have turned those records over to the National Archives. They're not being reviewed at the FBI.
So,
And they said the archives is in charge of release. We don't know anything about
Well,
when they.
that poses a very good question then,
yes.
because if they already turned it over to the National Archives, then has the National Archives posted them?
Well, what was they turning it over, putting them into the collection is one thing. Were they classified that they have to be declassified? I assume what's happening is, and I don't know what's in the records, but if there's anything in there where CIA, for example, has equities or the Department of State, they're going to have to go out. So I think, Jeff, what they meant was they physically transferred them to the archives, but that does not mean that someone's got to declassify them. If they're not classified, they should be up on the website.
If they turned them over to the archives, I believe that they should start posting them. Okay, because when you give it to the National Archives, you're essentially saying, we don't have any equity in this anymore.
No, 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 no. Because there are records in the collection that are still redacted. They don't give up the equities. That the act required all the records to be sent to the archives, but they retained their redactions until they declassified.
You're telling me these 2,400 FBI documents are still in redacted form?
But we don't know anything about them. But they must be because they haven't been released.
Okay. I mean, I don't think we know, whether they're classified or not. I think it stands to reason what you're saying, Larry. The CIA may claim equities in those, but then we're back to the same thing. It's like the president issues an order to release everything. Okay, yeah, that's fine, but we're just going to hold these things. It's like, wait a second, the president said this, at what point do they stop?
See, Jeff, this is one of the things that I believe Trump really screwed this up. Because if he would have obeyed the law as it was written back then, I don't think there was no counterclaim for why he couldn't do what he did and release them in a final unredacted form. But now with the ARB legislation now has passed, okay, now you get into all these, these brush fires with, wait a minute, our name is on that document. It's not just an FBI document. We have to look at that also. Okay.
So in theory, all that had to be done in 2017 was look at the grounds for postponement that the ARB had indicated, and someone reviews that and say, is that ground still there? But instead, they created a whole different system where the NSC was basically in charge, and they created, and then the NARA developed a guidance document for the agencies to review, and they had criteria in there that weren't in the statute. And they created this whole different process that is detached from the JFK statutory language.
Yeah.
Right.
So
now, what about Trump's new executive order? Okay.
He could have said under Section 5, all he had to say was, I hereby certify it's in the public interest to release these records. I instruct the National Archives to release them in full. He could have said that under the statute. He had that authority.
Okay, Larry, why do you think he didn't?
Because they got to him before he wrote the order and said, Mr. President, there's stuff in here. We got to review it before we let it go.
Mike Pompeo's still on this beat. You know what he did with Tucker Carlson? He sent his lawyer to sic him.
Oh, yes. But look, Trump fired 150 people from the NSC, but there's still going to be people in the CIA and the NSC and whatever that are probably these people he put in. I remember, I forgot who the name is. He was an assistant attorney general for a second in the first Trump administration. When I was talking to him in the green room, I said to him, why was there so much problem getting stuff done? He says, the moment these people become heads of the agencies, they get basically bought by their own employees. And they begin advocating for their own agency. So we don't know what's going on, but I think there needs to be whatever plan has been prepared needs to be disclosed to the American public. What are the criteria they're using because it's clear if you listen to Luna, when she was shocked that there was a review had to be done, there's obviously a review going on.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. So here we are. This is now, if you can believe it, and to me, it's really hard to believe. Here we are, 8 years past the termination date of the legislation. And here we are still arguing in this battle, this titanic battle. I mean, anybody who says a JFK case doesn't matter today, I mean, just look at this spectacle that's occurring now.
Well, Jim,
Okay.
think about it. The reason Congress said that they had to pass the JFK record was because the records wouldn't be released till 2029.
And here we are in 2025.
And the transparency plans that Biden approved, the earliest review would be in the 2040s. They
You know,
completely turned everything on its head.
Yeah,
yeah.
so I think that, I think we got to get out of this box,
Yeah.
right? And stop playing this game where like there's a law, but it doesn't apply to us,
Right.
Um, and so, but I think the only thing that can do that right now is, I mean, Congress could act, but I don't think they can get their act together and pass any legislation. Um, is, public opinion. I mean, Representative Luna learned where public opinion is on this, right? There's a lot of impatience. And I think she was, to her credit, I think she's paying attention to that, people don't want any more excuses, right? We're really down to do it or don't do it. And so, that pressure of public opinion, I think that can make a difference in terms of people might not want to do this, but the alternative is more unpleasant for them. And so they'll choose to do the right thing because doing the wrong thing will actually harm them in some way. They'll be humiliated. They'll be denounced on social media. They'll be ostracized from MAGA. Whatever it is, the force of public opinion will tell them, I better do this full disclosure thing because otherwise I'm going to get screwed. That's the only thing we have going for us is kind of a
Look
shame.
what happened to Tom Cotton.
Yeah, no, right. No, and that's why what happened to Tom Cotton is a good idea. It's like start backing up when you start making those arguments because they don't pass anymore.
So, but the thing is, Jeff, do you think that social media is the platform to pressure them, or like Tom Cotton got? Apparently, someone told me it was Brett Barr, not Jesse Waters, but that was national TV where was forced to step back. Is it still TV or some other mass media that?
Barry, I thought that was Tucker Carlson.
Well, first he told Tucker Carlson talked about it, and then Brett Barr on his show at 6 o'clock had Cotton come on, and as part of the conversation, he said, "There's this story that Tucker Carlson is." He said, "I never spoke to Tucker Carlson. I never said that." Blah blah blah.
So he denied everything.
Yes.
So yeah. So for the administration, I think social media and how Fox News is covering these things, they're going to pay close attention to that. And when they see that public opinion is like, cut the crap and give us the documents, the more that doctrine is enforced and people understand that's the message. And I hope that people understand it's not just the message of the MAGA base. This is one place where I agree with the MAGA base. We're tired of the crap. We want the documents now. When they get the impression that that's the MAGA base, the middle of the road base, the liberal base, everybody's on the same page, cut the crap, that's when we might be able to force them to do what they don't want to do.
So again, my question is for the people that are going to be listening to this program. Do they call their representative up? Do they go on to Luna's X page and say things? What do you think is the best way to get this sentiment out to the right people?
I actually think it's better to like contact people like Andrew Napolitano. Okay. I think it's better to do that, to contact the people, voices that we have that have already stuck their neck out on this thing, Okay. That was a very gutsy thing that Andrew Napolitano did. He was really sticking his hand out to be chopped off, exposing that thing about Trump, I have a lot of admiration for that.
The fact that, he said what Trump told him, which turned out to be Trump wasn't telling the truth to him. But for him to go out and say, reveal a private conversation with the president, that was pretty brave.
Yes.
So to answer your question, Larry, I mean, yeah, I think people should get in touch with their congressman saying, Representative Luna's on the right track. We need to have good hearings. We need to make JFK the priority. We need to quit screwing around. We need to find out where all the records are and get them out as quickly as possible.
Because
And
you
put
can
the
see what they did with the Epstein stuff. They had to fire the guy head of the FBI office in New York because he was resisting. I don't know if they ever made any progress on that, but Jim is so right. There is so much resistance in each of the agencies. You know, when I filed my lawsuit and they were producing records, they would farm out the reviews to contractors and different contractors at different levels of sensitivity. So I would get one email that the email address was blacked out, and then the email would be sent in a different batch. Someone else looked at it, and they would show the email. So there's not even consistency amongst the different agencies as to the standards they use.
yeah. Well, um,
Carl Lester suggested, why don't we bomb the White House and release the JFK records messages?
Well, because I actually think that Luna is a pretty good venue right now.
Yes.
Okay. I think she's pretty hot. I mean, she's getting a lot of attention, and not just from the top level, but from the bottom level, you
Well,
know.
see, it's Congress. It's not the executive branch. We're getting an
Right.
external force here that is putting
no,
executive branch.
I hope that the congressional hearings can be good and serious. And I got the feeling from her that that's what she wants.
Did she
Uh,
suggest that she was going to invite you to speak, to testify?
the plan, when the hearing's going to take place and who's going to testify, that's information now. But she is doing her homework, and that's a very positive step. The president's order is a positive step. I mean, I'm not
I'm
quite
just
sure.
concerned
I'm
that
half between hope and despair. Like it could go either way, right, Jim?
but
Well,
I'm
yeah.
concerned.
I mean, it all depends on, like, do the powers that be in the House, are they going to back her all the way? Okay. That's an interesting question, you know.
And she is really naive and a babe in the woods when it comes to this whole issue of national security and stuff. I would not be surprised if someone begins trying to release dirt on her to try to control her.
Let's not speculate about, I mean,
I'm not saying
yeah,
she has dirt, I'm
a
just
lot of
saying.
things, could happen. People ask me, "Oh, you do a lot of JFK work. Are you afraid for your life?" No, no.
Well,
We don't need to go there. There's no basis for going there.
she's on a steep learning curve, and I hope she doesn't get played by the people that you know she doesn't understand the process. But hopefully, you're right, and there'll be a real hearing. Um,
Yeah.
And I don't know Jeff, do you have any idea what's the purpose of the hearing? Like, we're not looking for new
Well, the
evidence.
purpose of the hearing is to educate the public about the JFK story. So,
No, she said she wants to change a narrative. I assume when she says that, she wants to turn around this whole fundamental belief that everybody, well, not everybody, but so many people have, that somehow the Warren Commission was right. Okay. And I think she's going to try and, broadcast, well, no, they weren't right. Okay. You know,
well,
Well,
that's a fair assessment of the records, especially the records that have come out since the 1990s. So, she's on the right track. I would put it that way.
I would prefer to have her call in the people at the CIA and the FBI and say, okay, why are you postponing these records? What's the reason? As opposed to we can't in one hearing, as Jim said, it takes 5 years to learn the JFK case. And one hearing, you can't waste your time talking about did Oswald was he the only killer? But to put people testify, why am I postponing the records and have them grilled? That's
Right.
what would be effective.
The hearing should be about the records, not about the event. Right.
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So you should have people like Thunheim, and you can get Jeremy Gunn there. He's in Morocco, but people pay for tickets all the time. You should have those guys there, and say, look, this is what we were trying to do. This is the obstructions that we had. This is why we couldn't complete the job. Okay, and then right after that, bring in guys at the CIA, guys at the FBI. Okay, now look, that was 8 years ago. Okay, so why are we still here arguing this?
And
All
three
right.
years ago, they issued transparency plans. Get the people in and say, why did you postpone these records? What is it in this? What information is in these records without disclosing secrets that you're trying to protect? Why
You know,
can't they?
and a really good question is, look, don't you understand that the longer you do this, the more suspicious people become?
Yeah,
Because
no,
the obvious question is, why are you doing this 62 years later? You know?
right. And I mean, but I think we have the answer to that question, which is they don't care. They don't care that they're encouraging conspiratorial suspicion. That's the cost of doing business with them. I mean, I don't I don't think there's any other explanation for the behavior other than that they don't care that 60, 70% of the people want these out. You know, their reasons for withholding it are superior to what 70% of the American people want. That's how they think. They think national security gives them that license. And so another president came along and said, do this or that. Okay, we're going to do this or that, but we're going to keep this stuff over here. Okay. That's what they've always done for the last 11 presidents. Why wouldn't they keep doing that now? That's what they're doing. It's got to be, right? That's what they're pushing back on now.
If
During
someone
the House Select Committee, when Christopher Dodd was questioning Helms, and Helms got this whole uppity, arrogant, kind of, at which he used to do a lot of, Christopher Dodd replied and said, "You know something, Mr. Helms? It's that kind of arrogance is why we're here today. Because you have this attitude that somehow you're in a different world, okay, than everybody else. Okay." So that's a good reply to that kind of, arrogance,
the
you
other
know?
the other interesting thing, by the way, is that the last executive order issued on national security was Obama. And another way to get around this is to issue a new executive order that changes the classification procedures. But Trump didn't do it in Trump one, and I don't know if that's another. He has the inherent authority to release records
Yeah.
as commander in chief.
So, uh, what I think a couple of people have put in questions into the Q&A. So let me just ask one. Here's Steve Jaffe, who was a investigator for Jim Garrison and who was a guest on the JFK podcast a while back. Why can't Trump order them released immediately? He signed the EO.
He can. He can. He could, under Section 5, certify that it's in the public interest. The public interest. You have actually, it's reverse. The records can only be postponed if the identifiable harm is of such gravity that it outweighs the public interest. He, in his executive orders, started with, "It's in the public interest to release the records." But then he took that back by saying, "And therefore I ask for a plan." He didn't need the plan.
Right. And it bears mentioning the plan's a month overdue. The RFK and MLK plans were due last Friday. No sign of them. So it's like, are they really serious?
I think the plan has been, my gut feeling, based on what Luna was talking about, I'm just reading tea leaves, is that someone submitted a plan and it's being reviewed. It hasn't been shared with the American people. He never said he was going to disclose the plan. And we need to find out if that plan is, if they're reviewing, are they using the transparency plans, or they actually came up with another? Because 3 years ago, they came up with transparency plans. So what plan is going to be prepared that's going to be different from the transparency plans?
So let
See,
me just remind.
the thing is about that clause in the ARB legislation. See, the longer time goes on, the more it weighs that it's in the interest of the public, okay, rather than the interest of national security. So
Yeah,
here we are 8 years past 2017, okay, and how could there still be, this kind of scale that somehow values national security over the public interest?
and
I don't understand that argument at all.
And Jim,
You know,
they've brought back Section 6 and Section 5. The federal government created an artificial distinction and said the Section 6 with the clear and convincing evidence, that's a very high evidentiary standard. That only applied to pre-2017. And after 2017, that doesn't appear because we were trying to argue you need clear and convincing evidence. That's like a criminal standard to disclose to prevent disclosure. And the government has argued in the lawsuit that no. And we argued it doesn't make sense for the standard to be higher 30 years ago. I mean, to be higher now than it was 30 years ago,
yes, yeah,
right? It should be lower standard now because more time has passed.
right, right.
Right, but Larry, I mean, since the president has changed, right? I'm thinking, shouldn't the Justice Department change their position? Their position was Biden had the discretion to withhold all these records. The president says all the records should be released. So the argument that the president has the discretion to withhold them is moot, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean,
they could change their litigation posture if they're told to.
well, yeah. So that's one thing I'm hoping for is, you
Now,
know,
does Trump's executive order, does that supersede what Biden did?
it does not, and I
It
think
doesn't?
well,
Not
it does not rescind the transparency plans.
right.
I mean, legally speaking, I believe this is true, and I think I'm asking you, Larry. The transparency plans are still in effect. They still govern these records. The reason that those records, legally speaking, the reason that we don't have the records is because they are withheld under the transparency plans that Trump has not touched.
Right. He could have expressly rescinded the prior Biden executive order like he did with other orders and rescinded the transparency plans. He didn't do that. That's because whoever was drafting this executive order did not know the details. And I suggested that when I, contacted Warrington that, they need to expressly revoke because right now it's still in effect. The transparency plans are still in effect.
Mhm.
He hasn't revoked them.
Right.
You
And so
can argue-
in the concept of fairness, we've been talking a little criticizing Trump, but Joe Biden did something pretty bad also, with that, what he did, before he left office,
My belief.
Biden was actually worse than Trump. I mean, Trump
I didn't want to say that. I'm glad the host of the show said it.
Let's talk personally. I mean, Trump kicked the can down the road. He said, "I've released all the records ahead of time," and that was true, except for the fact that he didn't release all the records, and the ones that he did release weren't released ahead of time. But otherwise, okay, we'll take that. Biden did do something worse. Biden said, "I'm going to kick the can down the road, and in the future, if you want to talk about this, go talk to the CIA because I'm washing my hands of it."
He basically said it was the last act under the statute, which he can't. That the archivist has to inform the Congress of that. I think personally that he never actually signed those executive orders. That the CIA they put the automatic stamp of his name on there. I don't think he ever saw. No, I'm serious. I think that he delegated his authority to all his department heads, and I think the NSC was given, whatever they decided.
So Trump's executive order, belated as it is a positive development. I think. Let's take a question from Jason. And this is to you, Jim. Jason says, I was going to ask Oliver this question, but I wanted to focus on my question on the film and JFK revisited through the looking glass. Is there an aspect to the original film or the director's cut that might have seemed shaky or outlandish at the time? I think he's talking about JFK, the movie, that has since been vindicated later on.
Okay, let me go through just three things. Number one, there was a garrison group in the CIA, okay, commissioned by Dick Helms in the fall of 1967 that was meant to counter garrison. And get this how complete this order was. Before, during, and after the trial of Clay Shaw, okay? So in other words, they were going to go after this guy even after Shaw got acquitted. And it's right there in black and white. It's one of the best things that the ARB put out. Okay. Secondly, everybody was up in arms, especially in the MSM, about how could somebody like Oliver Stone say that Kennedy was getting out of Vietnam at the time of his death? Come on. Well, the SecDef meeting of May 1963, it's right there in black and white. McNamara is saying, I want all the withdrawal schedules. Hand them in right now. Okay. Then he gets them. He turns around and he says, this is too slow. Okay. We're getting out faster. Okay. So that's, that's a second thing. Okay. Now, the fact is that for all the denials that have been made, and the ARB did this also, Clay Shaw had a covert security clearance from the Central Intelligence Agency. Okay. There was also another document that came out that said he was also a well-paid contract agent. So in other words, Clay Shaw lied about this issue numerous times in public. Okay. He even didn't tell his lawyers this. He wouldn't even tell his lawyers that he worked for the CIA. And in fact, the CIA was shocked when they learned this after they talked to Shaw's lawyers and they said, can you believe this? He hasn't even told his lawyers that he worked for us. Okay. So those are three things that Oliver got hammered about that ended up he was correct about those.
So Jim,
Yeah, no,
have
and
you ever spoken to him about Fred Litwin's charges?
oh,
Oh,
please,
please, we
Larry,
want to
let's
talk
not
about Fred
dignify
Litwin.
Fred Whitman
Okay.
with that's not necessary.
These things that Oliver was see, this is why I've always said, see, Oliver made that film kind of half in the sunlight, half under a tree, okay? Because he didn't have all the documents that
Right.
were necessary to complete, what he could have done. If he were to make that film today, okay, it would be that much stronger because he would have these things, more or less in his hands, okay, which he didn't have before.
That's what I always thought when I read when Operation Northwoods came out in 1997, right? A false flag plan to provoke a war with Cuba, while fooling the American people. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking, Oliver and Zach Sklar did not write this. This was the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Some Hollywood screenwriter didn't invent this. This was the
Right.
policy of the United States.
And let's not forget that once Kennedy got a load of this, he essentially told Lemnitzer, you're going to be out of here very soon, okay? And he brings in Maxwell Taylor, to take his place,
Yeah, and let me tell you one part of the Northwood story that gets forgotten, right? Kennedy has a meeting with General Lemnitzer in March of 62, where Lemnitzer comes in and says, look, you had that Bay of Pigs defeat. Here's the solution. We provoke an incident with Cuba, and then we go in and take them out, and you send in the 82nd Airport.
Double down.
And JFK says, I'm not interested in that. Don't bring this to me again. That was 62. What people don't know, what people forget is in March of 63, Lemnitzer has been kicked sideways. He's the NATO commander now. He's not chairman of the Joint Chiefs because he's ultra right wing and Kennedy can't stand him. Lemnitzer comes back to the Joint Chiefs and says, let's reconsider Northwoods. And on March 1st, 1963, the Joint Chiefs readopts Northwoods as their policy. And Northwoods is the policy of the Joint Chiefs to provoke a war with Cuba by staging a spectacular violent incident on U.S. soil and arranging for blame to fall on Cuba. That's policy from May 1st to September.
I'm really glad you brought this up because if you remember in the film, Oliver had this wonderful scene where Kennedy's not there, but the chair of the Joint Chiefs are there. and they're talking about Kennedy so derisively. There he goes. He's got his hand on the chicken switch already. And people thought, oh come on, this guy. It's true. That's the way these guys felt about him. Okay, behind his back, they were sneering at him, jeering at him, etc. They really were that strongly opposed to the things that he was trying to do. So Oliver really, I mean, and then you get this, by the way, in that wonderful book, The Kennedy Tapes, which is like almost an hour by hour of the Cuban Missile Crisis. The minute Kennedy walks out of the room, LeMay's making fun of him, okay, etc. And so that's really not dramaturgy. That's really not dramatic license. That's the way these guys. And by the way, Jeff, well, that was done under Maxwell Taylor. That wow.
Yeah.
That's probably why people like John Newman have suspicions about Maxwell Taylor. you know?
Jeff, so when the Joint Chiefs adopt that policy, does the CIA know about it? Is that limited to the Department of Defense? Is it widely circulated?
So the Northwoods plans were developed by something called the Psychological Warfare Board, which was both DoD and CIA people.
Okay.
The Northwoods plans, are okay. So, we stage a kidnapping or a hijacking. These were some of the scenarios that they were working on. We stage a hijacking and we blame it on Cuba. Well, they say, we have to be very careful about this because in a democratic society, people don't like that when the government tricks them. So they know that the whole point is to trick the public into a war. And they say, we need to rely on only the most trusted covert personnel. So if you know how DoD and CIA work, DoD would say, if it's got to be super covert, that's not our bailiwick. That's a job for CIA. So the creation and the implementation of Northwoods plans was a joint CIA DoD thing. It's a DoD project, but CIA people are involved.
So the idea of creating this domestic event, you think that news of that plan could have trickled down to Jamway people? And therefore they said, oh, now we have an excuse to do something. I'm just speculating, I'm just wondering.
Yeah, no, I mean, Northwoods was considered at the Joint Chiefs level. It was, prepared, briefed, investigated, developed at the staff level. So a lot of people knew about it. I mean, yes, it was classified, so you would have to be classified. But could people at JM Wave known about it? Yeah, I mean, quite possibly. I think that Northwoods is really, an understudied area of the JFK story. And I might add, when I forwarded my list of records of concern to Representative Luna, one of them was, there's 2 pages of the Northwoods documents that are still classified.
Jeff, did you put in there about the Schlesinger plan for the reorganization of the CIA? Okay, good, because I think that's an important document also.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Northwoods. So we will see what happens.
Now, does she have staff, a committee staff working with her, task force staff, or she just basically working on her own?
I don't know.
Well, all these people have a staff. There's 7 or 8 guys.
They have their own staff, but there's often like the oversight committee has its own staff, right?
Right.
Wondering if, can she borrow committee staff to help her with all this work they got to do?
That's a good question.
Yeah, and that's a concern. I mean, and you see this on social media, the social media chorus, they want to talk about Jeffrey Epstein and, that whole business. And, when I get asked about it, I say, first of all, the idea that there's an Epstein client list, Julie Brown, the woman who broke the whole Epstein story for the Miami Herald, she said, there is no Epstein client list. And she's the reporter who broke the story. So that's a totally different category of records. It's a different issue, really. And you know, people can be easily distracted by something like that, as opposed to JFK is more difficult. You know, it's more complicated.
A lot
It's
of the
more
Epstein stuff, there's grand jury stuff in. I mean, there's different issues with the reps Epstein, and for them to put everything together and UAPs, I mean, it just it's really unfortunate that it got globbed together. But
Um,
uh,
I want to give anybody in the audience a
Yeah, you
chance.
got a lot of questions there, Jeff. Yeah.
put your
Yeah,
hand up if you want to speak.
yeah. I want to say again that I'm sorry Oliver couldn't come tonight, and he was sorry that he couldn't come. He felt like he wasn't prepared, which, you know, if you don't feel you're prepared, I understand that. You don't want to go on. I'm hoping that he'll feel more comfortable, and hoping, Jim, you know, that you can convince him to come on, because we would really love to have him and hear his thoughts about the current moment. So but if anybody has any thoughts, you can raise your hand or put in the Q&A. There's a Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. There's also a raise your hand icon. We'll take, if there's any questions, we'll take them before we finish.
Let me just add this before, Steve Jaffe, as you mentioned, was an investigator for Jim Garrison. He's preparing a book. You probably know about this, okay, on his whole experience with, and he's been working on it for a very long time. Okay, like about 3 or 4 years. Okay, so that should be really, because I don't think anybody else besides Garrison has written a book about the whole New Orleans thing. So that should be something to look forward to. And
Yeah,
Tannenbaum's coming out with a book too, right?
Right. Is it this month, right?
What?
Is it this
April.
month or next month? April?
April.
Yeah, it's coming out next month. Yeah.
God's got his hand
Yeah,
up.
and I might remind people, Steve Jaffe, investigator for the Garrison investigation, was on the JFK Live podcast last year, and I recommend that for people who are interested in Garrison. I found it very interesting. I learned a lot from it, and people, if they're interested in that in particular, can check out that in the podcast vertical of JFK Facts. Chad Nagel has a question. Chad Nagel is JFK Facts correspondent in Washington. Chad, talk to us.
Yeah, hi, thanks. I had a question. I've actually put it in the chat thing for Larry. It's a legal question about the um, the executive orders that Biden signed. So I don't know if you've seen it, but I think they just appeared today. There are these headlines, and it's like the MAGA whatever. Um, I don't know who, but basically opponents of Biden have said that his signature might not be valid because it was all using an auto pen. I think you might have brought that up earlier, but this is an issue. And I'm wondering whether there might be a case there. Don't they have to prove that he was conscious of what he was signing? I mean, if it was an auto pen, it doesn't prove that he signed it. I'm just wondering. And by the way, Tannenbaum's book, according to Amazon, has been put back a month, so it's May now.
Oh, it's been pressed back until May. Okay.
That's what Amazon says. It's only 144 pages, according to Amazon. Pretty short. So.
Mere use of an auto pen by itself, I don't think is dispositive. The question is, was he aware that that this executive order was prepared, and did he know the contents of it? And the only way that you're going to know that is if you speak to him.
Yeah. And like, what does that have to do with JFK files, getting the JFK files out? We want to badmouth
because we were asking about whether Trump's executive order superseded Biden's. Biden's imposed the transparency plan.
The legal argument would be that the executive orders were not valid because the president didn't sign them or wasn't aware of them. But I don't know how you.
Okay, so if Biden's executive order isn't valid, what does that mean for Trump's executive order? Nothing, right?
But it means they can't rely on the transparency plan.
Well, it means, it's an interesting question, because then it means, the postponements by Biden may not be legally valid, but President Trump is now the president. So, he's still not going to release the records. I mean, he's
this idea that the problem with JFK records now is Joe Biden, that's absurd. Okay. That's absurd. Joe Biden is not the obstacle to release of JFK records. I assure you.
Right. I mean, to
Right?
play through that,
And think about it. Like, why are we talking about that? That's an effort to evade the issue and talk about something else and say Joe Biden is dumb and okay, that's fine. That has nothing to do with JFK records. That has nothing to do with the law. That has nothing to do with
But
what we're talking
except
let's
except
assume,
that
Chad,
the
let's assume.
transparency plans are the basis of the Department of Justice's case in the lawsuit by Mary Farrell Foundation in federal court. They're relying on the transparency plans to keep them. And now, as was just discussed, the agencies can retreat back into the transparency plans once they're, we don't know what the plans say. And the plans provided to Trump might actually incorporate the transparency plan. So I do think it's valid. I'm
So
not saying that the people that are accusing Biden are know what they're talking about or have the right motives. I'm just asking whether the auto pen might invalidate them in some way because the president is supposed to be conscious of what he signs, and I'm not sure Biden was conscious even of where he was most of the time.
no,
But
I'm a little constrained.
Wait a minute, let's not go that far, okay?
I'm a little constrained because we have an active lawsuit. But let me just say that if let's play out your theory. If in fact the executive orders are invalid, it simply means the transparency plans are no longer in effect, but the records are still postponed. And then you have to declassify them, and then we're back to Trump's order. So it just means that the transparency plans would not be used to declassify the records. They're invalidated, and then Trump is now in Trump's hands to deal with it. So I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I do want to mention just for people, RFK records are supposed to be released this past weekend. I was working with a group of people that put together a list. It's on the woman that is representing Sirhan Sirhan. We put it on her letterhead, and it was given to the White House on Friday.
And what is it, Larry?
It's a letter indicating what records they want to be released pursuant to the president's order.
Great. Could you send that to me? I mean, that's a good news story. We'll publish that in JFK Facts, or we'll do an item about that, because RFK and MLK story has slipped off the radar even more than JFK, and there's no plans. And so, we want to keep that out there because that's one of the three, that's one of the big cases.
And RFK is a little more complicated because most of the records are, not federal. But I'll send you the letter that was sent to Warrington. They modeled it after my letter, but I didn't want to have it on my letterhead.
Well, according to Lisa, and I guess everybody here knows, Lisa Peace wrote a very good book on the RFK case. Okay, A Lie Too Big to Fail. She says there were communications between the CIA and SUS. Okay, if you don't know, and RFK case doesn't get talked about very much, SUS is Special Unit Senator that was set up inside the LAPD.
Yes.
They didn't do the RFK investigation through the LAPD. They set up this special unit inside that was run by two former CIA agents, Pena and Hernandez. So there might be some communications there.
There are some records. I'm saying there are records. It isn't like the JFK where everything's federal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Diane, who represents Sirhan's interest, is the one we put on her letterhead. I'm sure she knows Lisa, and Lisa knows her, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there was definitely the SUS stuff, the Special Unit Senator, whatever, that's covered. But I'll send it to you, Jeff, the letter that was sent.
Okay. A couple of questions in the chat, and then we'll close it out. Jalal asks, does G. Robert Blakey still believe it was only the mafia was involved, or has he changed his mind? I think the answer, Jalal, is that Blakey's more open to CIA involvement than he was a while ago. He's more suspicious of the CIA and more likely to acknowledge that they had a role. I think that's a fair summary of where he's at.
Well, I actually talked to him about this, and I think he believes that the Cuban exiles were involved.
Yeah.
And, that's more or less saying CIA, because those guys didn't do anything without permission from the CIA. And I think he believes the front shot was probably from one of these Cuban exiles. What's his name? Hermanio Diaz, is that his
Diaz,
name?
yeah.
Yeah, okay,
And
yes.
Diwali also was another suspicious guy.
Mm.
Diwali was the guy that died the same day that Ferry died.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like Ferrenti and other people think that Marcello may have paid for it, but the actual carrying out of it, because the mafia can't control the autopsy. You know.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, last question from Arizona Greg. And maybe Jim, you can speak to this. He references an article in Kennedy and Kings from Johnny Cairns refuting Larry Hancock's thesis that Oswald was unwitting. Cairn argues that he was witting, citing a host of issues. What do you think?
Johnny Cairns' two-part article, which just went up yesterday,
Oh.
argues, I believe, very powerfully, that it's very, very hard to believe that Oswald was not some kind of witting intel agent. This new book by Hancock and Boylan tries to argue that he was a genuine leftist, and Johnny says more or less to the effect, well, wait a minute. You got this guy learning Russian in the army. You got this hardship discharge that took 10 days when, in fact, they were supposed to take 3 to 6 months. Okay. And he happens to know to go to Helsinki in order to get a 2-day visa. Okay?
I know, but Jim, none of that refutes the notion that Oswald, in his mind, was a sincere leftist. None of that refutes that.
I think his relationship with David Ferry does. Okay.
I mean, left-wing people.
And by the way, in this book, they mentioned David Ferry exactly once. Okay.
I don't think that's laughable.
Well, I think David Ferry had a very strong impact on Oswald's life, but both in the CAP, the Civil Air Patrol, and then later when you go to New Orleans.
And his favorite TV show was I lived 3 lives. He was a spy wannabe. Wasn't he, Jim?
I didn't hear it. What you say?
His favorite TV show growing up was I Lived 3 Lives?
Yeah, supposedly that was his favorite TV show. Yes.
I don't think that refutes the notion you can be a left-winger and want to be a spy.
Okay. But I think
that's
he was
a contradiction. That's exactly what Oswald was. He was a guy who was genuinely left-wing who wanted to be a spy.
He wants to be a spy for the government.
Yeah. So anyway. We've been at it for an hour and a half now, so I want to wrap it up. I want to thank everybody. I'm sorry Oliver couldn't make it tonight. He says he wants to come on, and I'm trusting that will happen. I think he wants to be a little more briefed and more in advance. So Jim, let's get Oliver comfortable and get him back on.
Okay, Jim, your homework assignment is to brief Oliver.
You have one job, Jim.
Let's get Luna on. Let's try to get Luna on.
Okay. All right. Let's try and do that too.
And I will. I have invited Representative Luna to come on, so I hope that she will.
Oh, terrific. Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Have a good night.
JFK Live Thursday at 8. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for showing up.
Okay. You're welcome.